I'm Julius, 32, a software engineer who built my life on logic and code. But nothing prepared me for the moment my parents said those words. The greatest gift for your sister's wedding is if you disappear from our family forever. Their request shattered my world, but I didn't beg. Instead, I packed my belongings, took my keys, and closed their door like a final punctuation mark. What happened next reshaped my entire existence. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about finding strength when family fails you. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I believed we were the perfect American family. My father, Richard, worked as a corporate attorney, while my mother, Martha, managed a successful real estate business. From the outside, we had everything. A colonial house with a manicured lawn, family vacations to Martha's vineyard, and holiday cards, featuring our smiling faces in coordinated outfits. But beneath that polished exterior lay a different reality, one where not all children were valued equally. The differences in how my sister Stephanie and I were treated started small. When I brought home straight A's in advanced math, my parents would nod and say, "That's what we expect from you." But when Stephanie passed basic algebra with a B-, they'd celebrate with dinner at her favorite restaurant. "Your sister works so hard," they'd say, "we need to acknowledge her efforts." At 10 years old, I couldn't articulate why this hurt so deeply. Science fairs became my battlefield for attention. In 6th grade, I built a functioning small-scale solar panel that powered a digital clock. My father glanced at it before leaving for Stephanie's dance recital, saying, "Interesting project, but we need to hurry, or we'll miss your sister's solo." I won first place, but my trophy sat unacknowledged on my desk, while Stephanie's participation ribbons for dance decorated our living room. "Julius is just naturally gifted," my mother would tell her friends, dismissing my achievements as effortless rather than the result of staying up until midnight reading advanced textbooks. "Stephanie has to work for everything she gets, which builds character." This narrative followed me through high school, my successes attributed to natural ability, Stephanie's minimal efforts praised as determination. My passion for computer science blossomed early. At 14, I created a rudimentary program that helped my father organize client files. "This is fine," he said, "but you should focus more on debate team or student government, things that will get you into an Ivy League." When I expressed interest in programming as a career, my mother sighed. "Computers are just a phase. You're meant for something more prestigious like law or medicine." Senior year brought the college decision that would widen the rift between us. Despite my perfect SAT scores and valedictorian status, I chose the State University's computer science program with a full scholarship over taking on massive debt for Cornell. The day I announced my decision, my father's face fell. "We've given you every advantage," he said, "and this is how you repay us. By lacking ambition." "It's the practical choice," I explained. "Same education, no debt, and their programming department is actually ranked higher." "Practical," my mother repeated with disappointment. "That's always been your problem, Julius. You never reach for more." 2 years later, when Stephanie chose a private liberal arts college with mediocre rankings and a hefty price tag, my parents beamed with pride. "She's following her heart," they said, "and making connections with the right kind of people." They never mentioned the tuition payments that strained their finances while I worked part-time to cover my minimal expenses despite my scholarship. After graduation, I joined a tech startup and quickly rose through the ranks. By 28, I had developed a patented security algorithm, earned a substantial income, and purchased a stylish apartment in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. Financial independence gave me distance from my parents' criticism, but I still craved their approval in a way that embarrassed me. Each promotion or bonus became another opportunity to finally make them proud. They remained unimpressed. "Computers," my father would say with a dismissive wave. "Is that really what you want to do forever? Your cousin Michael just made partner at his law firm." The dynamic shifted when Stephanie, after drifting through several marketing jobs, began dating Bradley Whitmore. The Whitmores owned a chain of luxury hotels and moved in social circles my parents had always aspired to join. Suddenly, my parents' social climbing shifted into overdrive. "Bradley's family knows the governor," my mother mentioned during every conversation. His sister was featured in Boston magazine's 30 Under 30. The subtext was clear: Stephanie had finally done something right, something more valuable than any of my achievements. During a rare family dinner celebrating my promotion to senior developer, my father interrupted my explanation of our company's expansion to ask, "Have you considered getting a more impressive-sounding title, developer? Doesn't really convey authority." Later that evening, as Stephanie showed pictures of her weekend at the Whitmore family lake house, my parents leaned forward with rapt attention. "Julius," my mother said, without looking away from the photos, "you should let Stephanie's friend Taylor give you fashion advice. First impressions matter in this world." That night, driving back to my apartment, I realized a painful truth: no amount of success would ever be enough, because my achievements weren't in the currency. They valued social status, connections, and appearances. Yet some stubborn part of me still believed I could eventually earn their respect on my own terms. I had no idea how completely that hope would be shattered, or how soon. The engagement announcement came during an elaborate dinner at Ristorante Milano, the kind of place where menus don't list prices and waiters speak in hushed tones. My parents had been mysteriously insistent about my attendance, calling 3 times to confirm I would take time off work. "It's a special family occasion," my mother emphasized. "Your presence is non-negotiable." I arrived to find Bradley's entire extended family present: parents, grandparents, siblings, and even an uncle who had flown in from London. When Stephanie stood tapping her crystal glass and Bradley dropped to one knee, presenting a diamond that caught every light in the room, I felt genuinely happy for her despite our complicated relationship. To my sister, I said during the toast round, raising my glass sincerely, "May your new life together bring you all the joy you deserve." I meant every word. After dinner, Bradley approached me at the bar. "Julius," he said, clapping my shoulder with practiced casualness, "Stephanie tells me you do something with computers." "I'm a software engineer specializing in cybersecurity," I replied. "Fascinating," he said, clearly uninterested. "My company uses a guy in India for our website stuff. Saves a fortune." He leaned closer. "Between us, how much does someone in your position actually make, ballpark figure?" Before I could respond, he continued, "Because I've been thinking about setting up a charitable foundation for underprivileged youth interested in technical trades. Might be something you could contribute to." The condescension was unmistakable. In Bradley's world, my career was a technical trade, not a profession requiring advanced degrees and specialized knowledge. I excused myself and found my mother in deep conversation with Bradley's mother. "Julius," she said too brightly, "I was just telling Eleanor about your apartment renovations." "The apartment is fine as it is," I corrected. "I haven't done any renovations." My mother laughed nervously. "Always so modest. He completely reimagined the space, hired one of Boston's top designers." That night marked the beginning of a new pattern, my parents reinventing me to fit the Whitmore family's expectations. Over the next few weeks, the wedding preparations intensified along with their efforts to polish my image. "We've scheduled you for a fitting at Milano Tailors," my father announced during an unexpected visit to my apartment. Bradley's family recommended them for the groomsmen suits. "I'm not a groomsman," I pointed out. "Well, you'll need a proper suit regardless," he said, scanning my living room with barely concealed disappointment. "And perhaps some new furniture before the engagement party here next month." "Party here? This is the first I'm hearing about hosting anything." "Your place is centrally located," my mother interjected, "and we thought it would be nice to show the Whitmores that our entire family has taste." She emphasized the last word while glancing at my comfortable but ordinary sofa. The pressure continued mounting. My mother texted daily with suggestions, everything from haircut recommendations to speech coaches who could help refine my presentation. My father sent links to luxury watches that would make the right statement at wedding events. Then came the parade of women. First, they invited Caroline, Bradley's cousin, to join our family dinner. "Such a brilliant mind," my mother gushed afterward. "She's finishing her PhD in art history at Harvard. Didn't you find her fascinating?" When I mentioned we had little in common, my mother sighed dramatically. "You need to broaden your interests, Julius. No one wants to hear about computer algorithms all evening." Next came Eliza, daughter of Bradley's family's business partner, then Victoria, who served on 3 prestigious charity boards. Each introduction came with the same transparent expectation that I would transform into someone worthy of these connections. The situation came to a head during the engagement party hosted at a hotel, not my apartment, after I refused. Stephanie pulled me aside during the event, her expression tense. "Can't you try harder?" she hissed. "Bradley's parents noticed you checking your phone during his father's toast." "I got an alert about a potential security breach at work," I explained. "I was making sure our systems weren't compromised." "This is exactly what Mom and Dad talk about," she said. "You don't understand priorities. This night is important to me, and you're thinking about work." "I do understand priorities," I countered. "I prioritized being here despite a work emergency. But apparently that's not enough." Her face softened momentarily. "Julius, I want you to be part of this. But you make it so difficult when you refuse to make an effort with Bradley's family." "What exactly would qualify as making an effort, pretending to be someone I'm not?" She didn't answer directly. "The rehearsal dinner seating chart is already so complicated. Bradley has 4 groomsmen plus family from overseas. The implication hung between us. I was becoming a logistical inconvenience." 2 days later, I received the wedding invitation, addressed only to Julius Montgomery, with no +1. The same week, my mother casually mentioned that I hadn't been included in the engagement photos because of space limitations at the studio. Then came the news that the bachelor party was just for the wedding party, and the family brunch was immediate family and wedding party only. One by one, I was being erased from the celebrations, present only when absolutely necessary and always with the unspoken instruction to take up less space, speak less often, and somehow become invisible while still physically present. Then came the Friday evening 3 months before the wedding, when everything finally shattered. That evening began innocently enough, another family dinner, this time with Bradley's parents joining us at my parents' home. The conversation flowed through safe topics: the wedding venue, the honeymoon plans for Bora Bora, and Stephanie's final dress fitting scheduled for the following week. I contributed when appropriate, and otherwise focused on enjoying my mother's pot roast, a rare home-cooked meal in her campaign, to impress the Whitmores. As dessert was served, Bradley's father Harold cleared his throat. "Richard, Martha, there's something Eleanor and I wanted to discuss regarding the reception." My father immediately straightened in his chair. "Of course, anything at all. We've finalized the guest list on our side." Harold continued, "And as you know, I've invited several colleagues from the hotel business, including 2 former governors and a senator." "Wonderful connections," my mother nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, well," Harold glanced at me briefly, "some of these individuals are rather traditional. Image-conscious, you might say." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I set down my fork, suddenly aware that the conversation had shifted to something concerning me. "We completely understand," my father said quickly, though nothing explicit had been stated. Eleanor Whitmore dabbed her lips with a napkin before adding, "We've always taught Bradley that character matters above all, and we certainly don't judge people based on their unconventional choices." Another glance in my direction. "But some of our guests might not be so open-minded." "What exactly are we talking about here?" I asked directly. An uncomfortable silence followed until Bradley spoke. "Julius, it's nothing personal. It's just that some of these people are very important to my family's business, and they have certain expectations about the kind of event this will be. Expectations that I somehow don't meet." Stephanie's eyes filled with tears. "Julius, please don't make this difficult. Everyone's just trying to make sure the wedding goes perfectly." By suggesting what exactly, I pressed. "Perhaps," Eleanor said delicately, "you could make some adjustments for the occasion. A more traditional haircut, a classic tuxedo rather than whatever modern style you might prefer." My haircut was a standard professional style, and I'd never mentioned any tuxedo preferences. These were simply proxies for their real concern that somehow I didn't fit their ideal image. "Julia," Stephanie pleaded, "just try harder, please. For me, this is the most important day of my life." The meal concluded with strained pleasantries, and as the Whitmores prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. "Wait in my study," he said quietly. "Your mother and I need to speak with you." 20 minutes later, after seeing Bradley's family out, my parents entered the wood-paneled study, where I'd spent countless childhood hours watching my father work while hoping for scraps of his attention. "Julius," my father began, unusually hesitant, "you understand how important this wedding is for Stephanie. And for you, I added. He ignored my comment. The Whitmores move in circles we've always aspired to. This connection could change everything for our family. Richard, my mother interjected, let's be direct. She turned to me, her expression, a mixture of determination and something else, perhaps guilt. Julius, we've always been proud of you in our own way, but you have to admit you've always been different. Different how? You know what we mean, she continued. You've never quite fit in with the kind of people the Whitmores associate with. Your interests, your career choices, even your manner of speaking, they're all just a bit off-putting to their circle. My father leaned forward. What your mother is trying to say is that your presence at the wedding might create tension. Not because of anything wrong with you, he added quickly, but because of how others might perceive you. So what exactly are you asking, I said, though I already knew. My father took a deep breath. If you really want to give your sister a gift that would make her wedding day perfect. He paused. Perhaps the greatest gift would be if you weren't there. The words hit like a physical blow. If you could disappear from our family gathering, my mother added, her voice eerily calm, just for that day it would make things so much easier for everyone. Disappear. I repeated the word hollow in my mouth. From my sister's wedding. From the family just for that occasion, my father clarified, though his clarification only made it worse. And if I refuse? My mother sighed. Then you'll be responsible for any discomfort or embarrassment that follows. Is that really what you want for Stephanie's special day? In that moment, with perfect clarity, I understood that nothing I had ever done, no academic achievement, career, success, or personal growth, would ever make me truly acceptable to them. The realization was both devastating and strangely liberating. I see, was all I said, rising from my chair. Julius, my father called as I reached the door, be reasonable. This isn't forever, just forever, I finished for him. That's what you're really asking. Because if I'm not welcome at the most important family event, then I'm not really family at all. I drove home in silence. No music, no phone calls. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and my own breathing. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt suddenly foreign. A space filled with memories of seeking approval that would never come. I didn't cry. I didn't call friends to vent. Instead, I sat on my balcony until sunrise, watching the city lights and making the most important decision of my life. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. If disappearing was the greatest gift I could give, then I would give it completely, thoroughly, and on my own terms. The plan formed with unexpected clarity as I watched the sunrise from my balcony. If my family wanted me to disappear, I would oblige them, but not in the half measure they expected. No, this would be a complete severance, a clean break that would leave no doubt about who had made the choice and what it meant. First, the practical matters. I opened my laptop and logged into the family investment account my parents had established years ago. Originally intended for all three of us, my parents, Stephanie and me, it had grown substantially through my contributions, particularly after my security algorithm patent sale. Though we all had access, I was the primary manager, since my financial expertise exceeded theirs. The account balance stood at just over $400,000. I carefully transferred my documented contributions, $326,000 plus accrued interest, to my personal account. The remaining balance, including all of my parents' investments, I left untouched. This wasn't about taking what wasn't mine, it was about reclaiming what was. Next, I called my real estate agent, Maria. Julius, what a surprise to hear from you on a Saturday morning, she said cheerfully. I'm selling my apartment. Immediately, I told her. I'll accept the first reasonable offer. Is everything okay? She asked, concern evident in her voice. It will be, I replied. How quickly can we list it? The apartment my parents had used as their showplace, bringing friends over without notice, hosting small gatherings whenever they visited Boston, would soon belong to someone else. The space they'd simultaneously criticized such a bachelor pad and bragged about in one of Boston's most prestigious neighborhoods would cease to be their social prop. By Monday morning, the apartment was listed. By Wednesday, I had 3 offers. By Friday, I accepted one for slightly above asking price with a 30-day closing. The speed of the transaction matched the clarity I felt about my decision. During that month, I methodically disconnected every strand that tied me to my family's web. I removed myself as beneficiary from my parents' life insurance policies. I formally resigned from my symbolic position on the board of my father's charitable foundation. I transferred my voting shares in my mother's real estate company back to her. Each severed connection felt like removing a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Each signature on legal documents felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The most difficult task was sorting through my possessions. The apartment that had seemed so minimalist suddenly revealed its hidden attachments. Books my father had given me with inscriptions that once seemed meaningful now revealed as performative. Family photos, where my smile never quite reached my eyes. Holiday gifts that reflected what they wished I was, rather than who I actually was. I packed only what truly mattered: my computer equipment, clothes I'd chosen for myself, rather than to please others, books that had shaped my thinking, and a small box of genuine mementos. In my college graduation tassel, a pebble from a solitary hike in New Hampshire, a birthday card from Marcus that simply said, "Proud to know you." The rest I donated or sold, shedding layers of a life built around seeking approval that would never come. On my final walkthrough of the empty apartment, my footsteps echoed against the hardwood floors. Sunlight streamed through the bare windows, illuminating walls now stripped of artwork and memories. This space that had witnessed my attempts to build an independent life, while still orbiting my family's expectations, now stood empty, a clean slate for someone else's story. I stood in the entrance one last time, keys heavy in my hand. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. These keys had represented achievement, stability, and adulthood. Now they represented something else, the physical embodiment of ties I was choosing to break. At the property manager's office, I handed them over with a strange sense of ceremony. As the door closed behind me, it felt like a final punctuation mark, the period at the end of a chapter I hadn't realized needed to end. That afternoon, I sent a brief, formal email to my parents. As requested, I will not attend Stephanie's wedding. To ensure my disappearance is complete and causes no further complications, I have taken steps to remove myself from family financial entanglements. My apartment has been sold. Please direct any necessary communication through my attorney, whose information is attached. I wish Stephanie happiness in her marriage. Julius. I expected immediate protest, angry phone calls, or demands for explanation. Instead, silence stretched for weeks. No calls, no emails, no text messages asking where I'd gone or why I'd taken such dramatic steps. Their silence confirmed what their words had suggested. My absence was indeed the gift they preferred. During those weeks, I systematically erased my digital footprint where it connected to family. I deleted social media accounts they followed. I changed my email address and phone number, providing the new contact information only to those I truly trusted. I set up mail forwarding to a post office box while I decided where to relocate. Marcus was the only person I told everything. Over dinner at his place, safely away from any family connections, I recounted the entire story. "Jesus, Julius," he said when I finished. "That's beyond dysfunctional. That's emotional abuse." "Is it?" I asked, genuinely uncertain. Years of normalization had blurred my understanding of healthy family dynamics. "Yes," he said firmly. "Normal parents don't ask their child to disappear no matter what's at stake." His validation released something in me, a tightly held breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For the first time since that dinner, I allowed myself to cry, shoulders shaking with the grief of losing not just my current family connections, but the hope that they would ever truly see and accept me. Marcus sat beside me, hand on my shoulder, saying nothing because nothing needed to be said. In his silent support, I found more family than I'd ever had in the house where I grew up. As the wedding date approached, I received my first contact from the family sphere. Not from my parents or sister, but from my cousin Tyler. "They're telling everyone you had a mental break and needed to retreat from public life," he texted. "Just thought you should know what narrative they're spinning." I thanked him for the information but felt strangely unmoved. Their story revealed more about them than it ever could about me. For the first time, I didn't feel compelled to correct the record or defend my reputation in their social circle. Their opinion and the opinions of anyone who would believe such a story without question no longer mattered. The day before the wedding, I checked into a small cabin in the Vermont woods, miles from cell service or internet. The symbolism was intentional. While they celebrated a union built partially on appearances and social climbing, I would commune with something real and unchanging. Standing on the cabin's porch that evening watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple, I felt something unexpected peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the quiet certainty that I had made the right choice. Whatever came next would be built on truth rather than pretense, reality, rather than appearance. I had disappeared as requested, but in that disappearance I was beginning to find myself. On Stephanie's wedding day, I woke before sunrise in the Vermont cabin. The mountains were shrouded in early morning mist, creating an otherworldly landscape that matched my strange emotional state. Today my sister would marry into the family my parents had always aspired to join, and I would be conspicuously absent, a ghost at the feast, present only in whispered explanations of why the brother of the bride was nowhere to be seen. I spent the morning hiking, pushing my body up steep trails until my muscles burned and sweat soaked through my shirt despite the cool air. Physical exertion kept my mind from wandering too far into imagined scenes from the wedding. My father's proud walk down the aisle with Stephanie, my mother's tearful smile during the vows, the empty chair at the family table that no one would acknowledge. By afternoon I had climbed high enough to lose cell service entirely. Sitting on a rocky outcropping overlooking the valley, I felt a peculiar sense of lightness. For the first time in my life, I was completely untethered from family expectations, obligations, and disappointments. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. As the sun began its descent, I made my way back to the cabin. Just as I reached the clearing, I saw a familiar car parked beside mine. Marcus had driven up from Boston. He stood on the porch, a six-pack of craft beer in one hand and a pizza box in the other. "Thought you shouldn't be alone today," he said simply. We sat on the porch as twilight settled over the forest, drinking beer and eating pizza in comfortable silence. Finally, Marcus spoke. "You want to know what happened, don't you?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure I do." "You do," he insisted gently. "Not because you regret your decision, but because you need closure." He was right, of course. The question had been hovering at the edges of my consciousness all day. Marcus took a long sip of his beer. "I have a cousin who works at the hotel. She texted me updates, and I couldn't help asking." "Chaos," he said simply. "Not the ceremony itself that went smoothly, but the reception was a different story. People kept asking about you, your mother's book club friends, your father's colleagues, even Bradley's extended family who'd heard about Stephanie's successful tech brother. Your absence was conspicuous. I hadn't considered this possibility that people would notice, would ask questions. In my family's narrative, I had always been peripheral, easily explained away, but perhaps I had existed more firmly in others' understanding of our family than in my own. Your parents kept giving different explanations," Marcus continued. "First it was a work emergency, then some vague illness, then a previously scheduled commitment you couldn't break. The stories contradicted each other, and people noticed. A small wounded part of me felt vindicated by this. Their attempt to erase me had created a more visible absence than my presence would have. The real kicker came during Stephanie's toast," Marcus said. "She had clearly had a few glasses of champagne, and suddenly she was talking about missing her big brother who taught her to ride a bike, and how she wished you could be there. She started crying, asking your parents why you really weren't there. Right in the middle of her toast, in front of everyone. I winced imagining the scene. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted to ruin Stephanie's day. Bradley's mother took the microphone and smoothly transitioned to her own toast." Marcus finished. "But the damage was done. People were whispering. Your parents looked mortified." I sat with this information, surprised by my own conflicted feelings. There was a certain grim satisfaction in knowing their carefully constructed narrative had crumbled, but also unexpected guilt at the public nature of the unraveling. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "I told you my cousin works." "No," I interrupted. "How do you know the details of Stephanie's toast? Your cousin couldn't have heard that from the kitchen." Marcus looked away briefly. "I was there." "What? How?" "Bradley invited me," he admitted. We went to the same prep school, remember? When he found out I was your best friend, he called and asked me to come. I think. I think he was trying to have someone there for you in a way. This revelation stunned me. Bradley, whom I'd dismissed as just another status-obsessed socialite, had shown more consideration for my feelings than my own parents. Did they see you there? Your parents? Oh yeah, Marcus chuckled. Your father nearly choked on his champagne. Your mother tried to corner me during the cocktail hour to pump me for information about where you were. I played dumb. We fell silent again, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The wedding would be over now. Stephanie and Bradley would be dancing, cutting cake, preparing to leave for their honeymoon. My parents would be networking with Bradley's family's connections, perhaps already turning my sister's moment into their own social climbing opportunity. And I was here under the vast Vermont sky, feeling the first fragile tendrils of freedom taking root. What now? Marcus asked eventually. Now, I said, I build something new. The weeks following the wedding passed in strange, suspended calm. I stayed in Vermont, extending my cabin rental month to month while I contemplated next steps. The proceeds from my apartment sale gave me financial breathing room, and my company agreed to let me work remotely, temporarily. Then 17 days after the wedding, the silence broke. My phone, the new number only a handful of people had lit up with a text from Tyler: heads up. The dam has broken. Expect contact. Within hours, my email inbox flooded. First came Aunt Patricia Julius. Whatever disagreement you're having with your parents to miss your only sister's wedding is unforgivable. Then Uncle Henry. Your behavior has brought shame to the entire family. Your parents deserve better. Cousins, family, friends, even my mother's college roommate, all expressing shock and disappointment in my selfish and immature decision. None of them knew what had actually happened. None of them had bothered to ask. The next day, the first direct contact came an email from my father. Julius, your theatrical disappearing act has had the desired effect: maximum embarrassment for your mother and me. If your intention was to punish us for suggesting a minor accommodation for your sister's special day, you have succeeded beyond measure. The Whitmores were understanding, but we may never recover from the damage to other important relationships. You've taken things much too far. Selling your apartment, withdrawing from the family accounts. These are the actions of someone having a breakdown, not a rational adult. We expect you to respond to this email immediately with your current address and phone number. This childish tantrum has gone on long enough. Dad. His words revealed everything. No acknowledgement of telling me to disappear forever. No recognition that they had rejected me, not the other way around. No apology. Just anger that I had taken their words seriously and acted accordingly. I didn't respond. 3 days later, my mother tried. Dearest Julius, we're concerned about your well-being. This extreme reaction suggests you might be experiencing some mental health challenges. We only want what's best for you and can recommend several excellent therapists in Boston. Stephanie is devastated by your absence. She returned early from her honeymoon because she was too upset to enjoy Bora Bora. Is that what you wanted? Please come home so we can discuss this as a family. Whatever misunderstanding has occurred, I'm sure we can work through it together. Love, Mom. The gaslighting was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. The suggestion that I had misunderstood their explicit request for me to disappear, the implication that my reaction indicated mental instability rather than self-respect, the emotional manipulation regarding Stephanie, it was all so familiar. I didn't respond to this email either. Finally, Stephanie herself reached out. Julius, I don't understand what's happening. Mom and Dad won't give me a straight answer about why you missed my wedding. They keep saying you're going through something but won't elaborate. Whatever they did or said, I'm sorry. I know how they can be. But I miss my brother. Please talk to me. Steph. Her message gave me pause. There was genuine confusion there, suggesting our parents hadn't told her about our conversation that night. Perhaps she truly didn't know what had transpired. After careful consideration, I sent a brief reply. Stefania, ask them what they told me was the greatest gift I could give you for your wedding. Ask them directly and insist on an honest answer. I'm glad you found happiness with Bradley. Julius, I didn't hear from her again for 2 months. Meanwhile, through Tyler, I learned about the ongoing family drama. The Whitmores, far from being understanding about my absence, had been deeply uncomfortable with the conflicting explanations. Bradley's father had directly asked mine if there were mental health issues in the family that they should know about. My parents' attempts to integrate into the Whitmore social circle had stalled, with several invitations mysteriously not materializing. More surprisingly, Stephanie had apparently begun challenging our parents in ways she never had before. According to Tyler, she had confronted them at a family dinner, demanding to know exactly what they had said to me. When they minimized their words, she had walked out the first time she had ever openly defied them. As summer turned to fall, I made my decision. I accepted a job offer from a tech company in Seattle, as far from Boston as I could reasonably go while remaining in the contiguous United States. I found an apartment in a high-rise downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of Puget Sound. I began building a life completely detached from the expectations and limitations of my family. And yet the shadow lingered. In quiet moments, the hurt would resurface unexpectedly, while unpacking a book my father had given me that had accidentally made it into my boxes, or hearing a song that reminded me of childhood road trips, or seeing a woman who resembled Stephanie in a coffee shop. These moments came less frequently as months passed, but they never disappeared entirely. 6 months after the wedding, as I settled into my new life 3,000 miles away, I received another email from my father, the first contact after months of silence. Julius, your mother and I have been reflecting on recent events. We may have spoken hastily regarding your attendance at Stephanie's wedding. If our words caused you pain, that was not our intention. We would like to open a dialogue about re-establishing contact. Thanksgiving is approaching, and your absence would be noticed. Regards, Dad. No acknowledgement of what they had actually said, no genuine apology, and still the concern about appearances, my absence being noticed rather than felt or regretted. I closed the email without responding, and looked out at the Seattle skyline glittering in the evening light. Their words no longer had the power to wound me as they once had. I had disappeared as requested, but in that disappearance, I had found something unexpected, the beginning of healing. Seattle embraced me with its cool rain and gray skies, a city where reinvention seemed built into the cultural DNA. My new position as lead security architect at Horizon Tech offered challenges that kept my mind engaged, and colleagues who valued my expertise without qualification. For the first time in my professional life, I wasn't working to prove anything to anyone but myself. My apartment on the 23rd floor became a canvas for creating a space that reflected who I truly was, rather than who I thought others wanted me to be. Gone were the sleek, impersonal furnishings that had filled my Boston apartment, chosen more for their ability to impress visitors than for comfort. Instead, I selected pieces that brought me genuine pleasure. A worn leather armchair, perfect for reading, industrial bookshelves that showcased my eclectic collection of technical manuals and science fiction novels, and abstract art in colors that energized rather than calmed. Marcus visited 3 months after my move, whistling appreciatively as he took in the view of Puget Sound from my living room. "This place is actually you," he observed, running his hand along the reclaimed wood dining table I'd commissioned from a local craftsman. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Your Boston place was like a hotel, impressive, but impersonal. This," he gestured around, "has your fingerprints all over it. It feels alive." His observation struck me deeply. I had spent years creating spaces, and a life designed to win approval rather than reflect authenticity. No wonder nothing had ever felt quite right. Marcus's visit cemented his role as the brother I'd chosen, rather than the one I'd been born with. During his week in Seattle, we hiked Mount Rainier, explored Pike Place Market, and spent evenings talking on my balcony over local craft beers. He had left a successful position at a Boston financial firm to follow me west, accepting a comparable role at a Seattle company. Boston was getting stale anyway, he said when I expressed guilt over his move. Some friendships are worth following across the country. Through Marcus, I met Rachel, a freelance photographer, who captured Seattle's urban landscape with an eye that found beauty in unexpected places. Our first date stretched from coffee into dinner, and then a midnight walk along the waterfront, talking about everything from data encryption to Japanese film. There was an ease between us I'd never experienced in relationships, no calculation, no performance, just genuine connection. "I like that you say what you mean," she told me on our third date. "No games, no hidden agendas." That's a recent development, I admitted, and shared a condensed version of my family history. Rather than offering platitudes or uncomfortable sympathy, she simply said, their loss with such conviction that something tight in my chest loosened. With Rachel, I found myself sharing thoughts and feelings I'd previously kept locked away, fearing judgment that never came. While my personal and professional life in Seattle flourished, news from Boston trickled in through Tyler, who had become my unlikely connection to family events. His text messages arrived irregularly, each one offering a glimpse into the consequences of my disappearance. "Aunt Patricia and Uncle Henry had dinner with the Whitmores last night," he reported in one. "Apparently, Bradley's mother asked pointed questions about why you weren't at any family gatherings. Your parents' explanation about your mental health retreat isn't holding water anymore." Another text revealed, "Your dad's firm lost the Whitmore hotel chain account. Word is, Bradley's father questioned your dad's family values after hearing conflicting stories about your absence." The most surprising update came 6 months after my move. "Stephanie and Bradley had your parents over for dinner last weekend. Huge fight erupted when Bradley mentioned reaching out to you directly. Your mother said something about family loyalty, and Stephanie apparently shot back with, like the loyalty you showed Julius. They left without dessert." I received this news with complex emotions. There was no satisfaction in my parents facing social consequences, only a sad recognition that they were reaping what they had sown. More surprising was Stephanie's apparent defense of me. The sister who had always aligned herself with our parents' values was possibly developing a perspective of her own. My suspicion was confirmed when 8 months after the wedding I received a letter from Stephanie, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter on heavy cream stationery. "Dear Julius, I asked Mom and Dad what they said to you before the wedding. At first, they deflected, saying you had misinterpreted their words. I persisted, and finally Dad admitted they had suggested you not attend the wedding because they were worried about how Bradley's family would perceive you." I was horrified. I had no idea they had said such a cruel thing. "I want you to know I never asked them to exclude you. When you didn't show up, they told me you had a work emergency. I only started questioning their story when I saw how they changed their explanation, depending on who was asking. I'm ashamed it took me so long to see what was happening." Living in Bradley's world has opened my eyes to how toxic our family dynamic has been. His parents treat him and his siblings with respect even when they disagree. They celebrate differences rather than trying to erase them. "I miss you, Julius. Bradley misses you too, though you barely had a chance to know each other. He says his initial impression of you was that you were the only genuine person in our family. I understand if you want nothing to do with any of us anymore, but if you're ever open to it, I'd like to try to build a relationship with you. A real one this time, not the performance our parents orchestrated. With love and regret, Stephanie." I read her letter multiple times, emotions swirling. There was hurt that she hadn't seen our parents' treatment of me sooner, anger at the years of isolation I'd endured while she basked in their approval, but also a fragile hope that perhaps one familial relationship might be salvageable. After days of consideration, I replied with a brief email acknowledging her letter and suggesting we proceed slowly. "Trust," I wrote, "once broken, can only be rebuilt gradually." Our cautious reconnection began with occasional text messages, then phone calls every few weeks. Stephanie shared her own journey of realizing how our parents' values had shaped her perceptions and choices, often to her detriment. I listened with growing empathy as she described the pressure she'd always felt to be perfect in their eyes. "I think I was so hard on you growing up because I was jealous," she admitted during one call. "You always seemed so sure of yourself, so clear about what you wanted. I was just trying to be whatever they wanted me to be." I wasn't sure of myself, I corrected her. I was just more willing to disappoint them to be true to myself. As winter turned to spring in Seattle, I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma, Dr. Rivera helped me recognize patterns I hadn't been conscious of, the constant seeking of approval I'd never receive, the internalized belief that I was somehow fundamentally unacceptable, the habit of diminishing my own needs too. accommodate others. You didn't just leave a toxic family situation she observed in one session. You rejected a false narrative about your own worth. That's incredibly difficult and incredibly brave. Through therapy, I began to understand that my decision to disappear hadn't been just an angry reaction but a necessary step in my own healing. What had felt like destruction was actually the clearing of ground for new growth. Meanwhile, Rachel had become an essential part of my new life. Unlike previous relationships where I'd carefully curated my presentation to be what I thought a partner wanted with Rachel, I simply was. She moved into my apartment 10 months after we met, adding her photography books to my bookshelves and her vintage camera collection to my office shelves. "I never thought I'd live 23 floors above the ground," she joked as she unpacked, "but I'd follow you to the moon if that's where you decided to set up shop." The casual certainty of her affection still startled me sometimes, the way she found me worthy of love without conditions or qualifications. As the 1-year anniversary of my departure from Boston approached, I received another unexpected communication, an actual handwritten letter from my father, the formal weight of his stationery and fountain pen ink, a stark contrast to the surprisingly vulnerable content. "Dear Julius, a man reaches a certain age and begins to evaluate his life's work. I have always taken pride in my professional accomplishments, the respect of my colleagues, the legacy I built in the legal world. What I failed to consider until recently was the legacy I was building within my own family. Stephanie has made it abundantly clear that your absence from her wedding was not your choice, but the direct result of words your mother and I spoke. Words I am deeply ashamed of now. There is no excuse for telling one's child that their disappearance would be a gift. None whatsoever. I could attempt to explain the pressure we felt from the Whitmores, the social aspirations we had pinned on that connection, but any explanation would only compound the wrong. I failed you as a father, failed to see your unique strengths, to celebrate your individual path, to provide the unconditional love that is a parent's most sacred obligation. If you are willing, I would like the opportunity to apologize in person. I understand if you refuse. What I did is possibly unforgivable, but I want you to know that I recognize the gravity of my mistake, and I carry the regret of it daily. Your father, Richard Montgomery." The letter sat on my coffee table for weeks. I read it repeatedly, searching for the manipulative undertones I'd come to expect from my father's communications. Finding none, I was left with the disorienting possibility that he might genuinely regret his actions. After much consideration and several discussions with Dr. Rivera, I decided to take a carefully measured step. I would not return to Boston, but I would allow a brief meeting the next time I visited the East Coast for work. When that opportunity came, I suggested meeting Stephanie and my father, but not my mother, who had made no similar overture, at a neutral location, a restaurant in Cambridge, far from the family home and the scenes of previous conflicts. The meeting was set for May, 13 months after I had walked away from my former life. As the date approached, I felt a strange calm. Whatever happened, I was no longer the same person who had desperately sought approval from people unwilling to give it. I had disappeared as requested, but in that disappearance I had finally begun to fully appear to myself. The restaurant in Cambridge was my deliberate choice, an upscale farm-to-table establishment where my father would feel comfortable, but that held no history or associations for any of us. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. The maitre d' led me to my seat with a respectful nod, and I ordered sparkling water while I waited, oddly calm despite the magnitude of the upcoming encounter. Stephanie arrived first, elegantly dressed, but with a nervousness in her movements that reminded me of our childhood, how she would fidget before piano recitals, terrified of disappointing our parents. We embraced briefly, the gesture still unfamiliar after years of familial distance, followed by months of cautious reconnection via phone and text. "You look good," she said, studying my face. "Happy?" "I am," I replied simply. "Seattle agrees with me." More than Boston ever did she acknowledge with surprising insight. Our father arrived 5 minutes later, and I was struck by how much he had aged in the 13 months since I'd last seen him. His hair had gone fully gray, and new lines etched his face. He approached our table with uncharacteristic hesitation, the confident stride of the successful attorney nowhere in evidence. Julius, he said, his voice catching slightly. Thank you for agreeing to this. We settled into an awkward conversation about neutral topics, the restaurant's reputation, the unseasonably warm spring, my flight from Seattle. The superficial exchange continued through the appetizer course, none of us quite ready to address the elephant in the room. Finally, as our entrees arrived, my father set down his fork and took a deep breath. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice steady but subdued. What your mother and I said to you before Stephanie's wedding was unforgivable. We prioritized social appearances over our own son. There is no justification for that, and I won't attempt to offer one. The directness of his acknowledgement surprised me. I had expected equivocation, perhaps an attempt to minimize or reframe their words. Instead, he continued with unflinching honesty. We were wrong about so many things, Julius. Wrong to value the Whitmore's approval over your presence. Wrong to treat your achievements as somehow lesser than conventional success. Wrong to try to mold you into someone you were never meant to be. Why now? I asked. What changed? He glanced at Stephanie before responding. Several things. The Whitmore's reaction, for one. Bradley's father called me into his office the week after the wedding and asked point blank what kind of father excludes his son from his daughter's wedding. Apparently, Bradley had told him the truth after Stephanie confided in him. It shouldn't have taken outside judgment for you to recognize your actions were wrong, I noted. No, it shouldn't have, he agreed. But that was only the beginning. After you disappeared, truly disappeared, I began to reflect on what we had lost. Not the apartment you sold or the financial connections you severed, but you, your perspective, your integrity, your refusal to compromise your authenticity despite immense pressure. Stephanie reached across the table to touch my hand. Julius, when I found out what they'd said to you, everything shifted for me. I started seeing our entire childhood differently, how they'd always treated you as somehow deficient when you were actually just different from what they wanted. It made me question every value they'd instilled in me. Your absence created a void that forced us to examine ourselves, my father added. And what we saw was deeply uncomfortable. I absorbed their words, searching for the familiar sting of manipulation, but finding instead what appeared to be genuine remorse. Still, years of conditioning made me wary. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. But words are relatively easy. You told me to disappear from the family forever. I took that seriously, and I built a new life on the other side of the country. That can't be undone with a single conversation. We don't expect it to be, my father said. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for things to return to how they were. That's impossible, and frankly, things weren't good before. I'm simply hoping we might begin to build something new, something healthier with appropriate boundaries and respect for who you actually are. His acknowledgement of boundaries struck me as significant a concept the old Richard Montgomery would have dismissed as unnecessary emotional coddling. Perhaps there had been real change. Our conversation continued through dessert and coffee, diving deeper into specific, painful memories that needed acknowledgement. My father listened without defensiveness, as I described the cumulative effect of years of subtle dismissal and overt criticism. Stephanie shared her own realizations about how she had been complicit in the family dynamic, often aligning with our parents against me, to secure her own position as the good child. By the time we left the restaurant 3 hours later, something had shifted. Not a miraculous healing or instant reconciliation, but a crack in the wall of estrangement through which new possibilities might eventually emerge. Your mother wants to see you, my father said, as we stood on the sidewalk outside, but I told her that would be entirely your decision on your timeline, if ever. This respect for my autonomy was perhaps the clearest indication that something fundamental had changed. I'm not ready for that, I said honestly. I understand, he replied, and I believed that perhaps he did. Back in Seattle, I shared the experience with Rachel as we sat on our balcony, watching the sunset paint the Olympic mountains in shades of pink and gold. Do you think you'll ever fully reconcile with them? She asked. I'm not sure fully is possible, I replied. But perhaps we can build a new relationship that acknowledges the past without being imprisoned by it. And is that what you want? I considered her question carefully. What I want is to live authentically, without the weight of their expectations or disapproval. If they can respect that, then yes, I'd like some form of family connection. If not, I've already proven I can thrive without it. Rachel squeezed my hand. That's the difference now. Before you needed their approval. Now you're willing to welcome their presence, but only on terms that honor who you truly are. Her insight crystallized something important. My disappearance hadn't just been an act of severance, but of self-reclamation. In walking away, I had found the courage to define myself on my own terms. Over the next several months, tentative new connections formed. Weekly phone calls with Stephanie evolved into genuine sibling support. Occasional emails with my father focused primarily on neutral topics, but occasionally venturing into more meaningful territory. No contact with my mother, who remained unable or unwilling to acknowledge her role in what had happened. 6 months after our Cambridge meeting, Stephanie and Bradley visited Seattle, showing them my new life. My apartment with its spectacular views, my office at Horizon Tech, where I was now a respected senior executive, the local haunts where I was known by name, felt like completing a circle. They met Rachel, and the four of us spent a weekend exploring the city and the surrounding natural beauty. On their final evening, as we shared a bottle of Washington wine on my balcony, Bradley said something that struck me deeply. "You know, when I first met your family, I thought you were the odd one out. Now I realize you were just the first one brave enough to break free from a toxic pattern. Stephanie followed your example in her own way." My sister nodded. "It's true. Watching you choose yourself, your authentic self, over their approval, gave me permission to question everything. I'm still working on it, but I'm getting better at recognizing when I'm making choices to please them versus choices that align with my own values." That night, after they left for their hotel, Rachel found me looking at old family photos I'd kept in a box but rarely viewed. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently. "No," I said. "Just appreciating the journey. A year and a half ago, they told me the greatest gift I could give was my disappearance. They had no idea that in disappearing from their narrative, I would finally appear fully in my own life." I replaced the photos in their box, not discarding them, but putting them in proper perspective. They were artifacts of a past that had shaped me but no longer defined me. 3 weeks later, I received a job offer from a major tech company in California, a prestigious position that would advance my career significantly. In the past, I might have agonized over how such a move would affect my tenuous family reconciliation. Now I evaluated the opportunity purely on its merits for my professional growth and personal happiness. When I accepted the position, I informed my father and Stephanie matter-of-factly, with no anxiety about their reaction. My father's response was simple: "Congratulations. It sounds like a perfect fit for your talents." No guilt, no manipulation, no subtle suggestion that I was moving farther away from family obligations. As Rachel and I prepared for our move to California, I reflected on the profound truth I had discovered through this painful journey. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to disappear from others' limiting perceptions, so we can finally appear authentically in our own lives. The family I was born into had asked me to vanish, but in doing so, I had found something far more valuable: the ability to stand firmly in my own truth, surrounded by people who valued me exactly as I was, not despite my differences, but because of them. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to discover your true self? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult moments. Remember, sometimes the hardest decisions, like closing a door permanently, lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives courage to anyone facing their own difficult choices about family authenticity and self-worth.